All right, Shakespeare. Is he the pinnacle of English literature? Should we prop him up on a pedestal and never doubt him as our superior god when it comes to writing? What do you think, Michael?
What do I think? I think well, maybe we shouldn't elevate him to be deity. That seems a little extreme. But
I don't know. From all accounts, he had the facial hair for it. I mean, at least a Greek god.
My. All right. Well, point is, I think we should still, he should still be looked at a lot. He's still arguably he's relevant. It's a really good source. He wrote some great stuff. It's hard to argue that we shouldn't look at it. I don't know. Like, what do you think, Mister Dripping Sarcasm?
Okay. Yes. That was obviously sarcastic. But I do think that he's a little bit overrated because people argue that he uses like themes that can be easily interpreted throughout every single generation. Well, so many people do that. I mean, you look at so many other writers that he had back in his time period. Granted, they didn't write in the vernacular, so it's a lot harder to understand their stuff, and it's already for like the average English student hard to understand Shakespeare because he wrote in the vernacular of his time period, which wasn't exactly, it's not exactly modern English. That's not how we talk anymore. We don't use our these and thous. But if you look at Shakespeare, like, he wrote in such, like, I don't want to use the word base. I guess I want to use the word, like, common characteristics of humanity and whatnot, such as, like, love and hate and how, I'll use Romeo and Juliet, for example, and how, like,
classically stated by someone to be a bunch of horny teenagers running around. That's a side comment. Back to your point.
Yeah. Well, Romeo and Juliet, where they try and like he tries to make it so that it's like very basic. Like they're two teenagers who are lovers and they can't see each other because of the circumstances that are under. That's very common. Like there's a lot of movies that will do that sort of theme as well now, and they can still be interpreted later on, but Shakespeare, because of his time and place, and it was written in the vernacular, and English teachers like to obsess over him, he gets overplayed a bit.
Well, I don't know, I don't know if overplayed, if something's good, you're going to listen to it a lot, right? And for, like, broad themes, sometimes, if you're going to teach it to high school students, for example, as we have been put through, we read a Shakespeare play every year, it's broad themes. They're relatable. They're still totally relatable today because without broad themes, it kind of stands the test of time. And I'd argue that frankly, Shakespeare did it best. He put out these themes in a way that were easily accessible, and I think accessibility is part of greatness. If something's so underground that it can, like, hipsters will be saying, you probably haven't heard of this, but you probably wouldn't understand it. But no, where Shakespeare's, mainstream, and, you need something like that for people to look at. You need something for that to last a long time. It also gives you a glimpse of the past, as well as, and the thing, even those who aren't really into history, they can still say, okay, this is sort of relatable. I had a girlfriend once, and her parents didn't like me. We didn't die, but,
Well, she did.
Oh.
Well... No, but I agree mainstream, but if you look at the mainstream in some lights, I mean, you can look at a band and you say like, oh yeah, they're great because everybody loves them. They're very popular. They must be good. And then you listen to them and they're like One Direction. That's kind of a disappointment. I'm just saying, I'm not comparing Shakespeare to One Direction. I mean, One Direction is obviously like Hitler, but it's. I don't think saying it's mainstream can qualify it as good, but saying that he does it's very easily it's accessible. I think that a lot of things are easily accessible. Like we can still look at those types of the concepts of what relates back to humans and whatnot. And I think that there's a lot of movies now that are still very, very accessible. I mean, with piracy, granted, it's in that gray area. We don't know right now if it's legal or illegal. I think it's very easy to get a hold of movies and like books and basically any form of media through that. So I don't think that the accessibility makes it better.
Well, I'm not exactly saying people like being able to find it. I'm saying it's accessible themes, things people can relate to.
Yeah.
You know, because if you've got something about
Oh yeah.
some themes are just like out of the box. You know, if you write a play about a cannibal who's eating his sister, not most people can't relate to that. Whereas if you get people like if you look at something like Macbeth, some people are probably it's kind of extreme things where some people probably pick out little bits. Like Macbeth, you probably don't like somebody, but you're probably not going to kill them. Or but even in that play, it's not so much about the killing; it's about the ambition. It shows people are ambitious, and I think they're able to relate to that because they want to be people in general want to be successful. And that way, people can look at this play and be like, okay, this is interesting. I can relate to it. I'm ambitious as well, and so maybe I'll enjoy this a bit more.
Yeah, but I don't think that that they have those accessible themes that we can relate to. I don't think that makes it better because there's a lot of it's so broad that you can do that. I mean, you can look at Star Wars, which is so far off. I mean, we're not exactly in space right now. And, we are, but we're not in space at the point that they are, where we're colonizing other worlds. But people will look at that and go, oh, hey, I want to get out there, and I want to get out in space. I want to, travel out there because it's just one of the final frontiers. That's something that a lot of people can relate to, like the whole concept of that generation that wanted to be astronauts because of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. I don't think that the merits that also. I don't think that also makes it great. I think that that's just commonplace in a lot of our works that we do.
So, assuming you're saying that Shakespeare is not all that it's cracked up to be, is there something better than it? Is there something? I think Shakespeare did what he did. He did it best, and I think he did it at least early. Not to say he did it first, because he did it very early, but to say first, I think would be a tad presumptuous.
Well, you can't say it's first because half of his stuff was based off of Greek and Roman poetry.
He adapted it
plays.
into plays. Yeah.
Well, he based plays off of their plays too, but granted, he changed it up a lot usually. So he was. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that he's overrated. But I also do believe that a lot of this is opinionated. So it's hard to argue it because it is entertainment at the end of it, and a lot of entertainment is just hey, I think that death metal is awesome. I think that hip hop is awesome, and then the person who said death metal wants to kill the guy who said hip hop because he believes that and vice versa because they both think that the other music sucks.
Yeah, for some reason there's strong feelings. Yeah, I think sometimes, I think part of it is, we as in our high school, we've been raised to, sort of see Shakespeare as this, it's this kind of thing that, fancy people read. You're classy if you read Shakespeare. And if you read, some other, if you read Twilight, you're not, Twilight isn't classy, by the way. But
what are you talking about? It sparked so many great things like 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh gosh, we're not going there. That's a bad place.
But it was so well written, it's the grammar and everything.
Bad place. Okay, Shakespeare is just he does it right, and the thing is, at least it's even accessible today, I'd say, because stuff from older stuff, not all of it may be translated. Shakespeare's been done extensively, and they've got everything on the other page, so you can look over it and relate to it. And I think that, frankly, due to its accessibility and the fact that he's done it so well, and the fact that simply we're used to it, sometimes change isn't good. If you suddenly implement things, I'm sure English teachers everywhere would be, crying.
Yeah. I mean, we get back to our literature study teacher's Ball, who just wants to whip out a cane every single time that we use a conjunction that shouldn't exist, or we start using that slang. It's actually quite funny, throws chalk at us, locks us in the closet. No, I'm kidding. That doesn't happen often. Yeah, but I think that change is good because language needs to change to adapt to the times, and there's a lot of things that need to happen to change. I mean, obviously you can take the conservative route and go, well, if it's working, why get rid of it? And that's perfectly fine. But we're talking about entertainment, and in order for it to be relevant and interesting, it needs to change.
Well, Well, I think what's important is the themes of this, and it's the themes and the accessibility of the themes. And you can adapt language. You know, you got to get one guy who really likes Shakespeare and thinks I think the world needs to see this in a light that's much more even more accessible than it is. So he's using modern language and using language that your average Joe or Jane can understand. That way like everybody can understand it. Like, it's been done. Or even if you just add a modern twist to it, like they've redone Romeo and Juliet, which frankly not his greatest work, but it's still making it more accessible, and it's a classic story. Like it's classic. I think at least, even if you say that it's overrated and maybe we shouldn't study as much as we do, I think at least we need to look at it at some point, maybe once or twice rather than four years in a row.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I also agree that Shakespeare, I think one of the reasons that we study him, he's a lot easier to understand than the other playwrights that were going on at the time, because they all wrote medieval times, whereas he wrote in the vernacular, so he could kind of understand, because it was at that point where it was evolving into somewhat what it was going to become now. But there was playwrights like Marlowe where you could not understand any of it. It was just I've read it.
Cater to the audience.
I've read it, and it sounds like a completely foreign language. It's just not good. Well, it's good. The ideas are good, but the language, I just can't wrap my mind around. So I guess that wraps this up anyways. I'd just like to apologize to anybody who really likes Twilight. I have a grudge out against it because it made vampires not quite as,
cool.
horrifyingly cool as they used to be. It's just...
On a kind of Halloween-y note.
Dracula's my favorite! Ah!
Okay. All right. Thanks for listening.